recipe is focusing on that smell. Okay, so big one that a lot of us rely on. And actually, we have maybe, what is it, 5, 6, Jeremy could correct me, but tastes in our month. But we have so many more abilities to smell, right? So that's how we taste so many different things. We actually use our nose, the olfactory system, to bring in multiple tastes, even more than our actual tongue. So certainly when we're going through treatment, some people lose their lack of smell or their tastes change, right? So using those herbs and spices can really be super beneficial to like reactivate and wake that up. So for some people, they have this constant salty taste in their mouth, right? Everything just tastes salty. So in those situations, you're going to want to add in extra sweet flavors to counteract that. Some people always have this bitter taste. Everything that they have is bitter. So we add things that are more sweet to change that. And for those, sometimes taste changes, like there's just, bland taste. So, adding in a little bit more salt or sweet flavors can actually really help. Or, bringing in those antioxidants, so those herbs and spices to enhance the flavor of whatever the dish is. But here we're talking about basically mindfully eating with our nose. So like I discussed earlier, you might pass by a bakery or a bagel shop and smell the cooked the baked breads and the sweets, and, maybe you just had lunch or you just ate, and it's just like, all of a sudden you're like, ooh, I could have that. I know when I make muffins, my entire house smells like cinnamon and just deliciousness. So, we use that obviously to help with our appetite sometimes. So again, for those experiencing a low appetite or, they need to gain weight, well, using those, nice smells could really be helpful. Now, for other people, of course, that sense of smell, like it's too much, it's over enhanced. They get nauseous or vomit because of those smells. So just kind of being aware, open a door, maybe, be cautious of the foods that either you're making for somebody or you're making for yourself. And then for those who, are actually looking to manage their weight, well, using that as a way to be more mindful, right? Instead of eating more, right? Just kind of appreciating those smells and those senses to kind of be more present in the moment and, evaluate, are you hungry? Are you not hungry? What is this kind of, why are you eating for those particular reasons? So there's so many reasons or ways to use the smell, kind of our nose during the food and eating and cooking preparation. And I invite everybody to do so because it's such a wonderful and beautiful practice to be in the moment and it's a way to really slow down and enjoy your food as well as the company that you're eating with.
Okay, so for this recipe and to draw on the smell hunger, we're going to make a really nice baked good using some spices and some very aromatic ingredients. This was actually inspired by a request from Christine. So thank you, Christine, who I believe it was sort of a soft, like ginger bread, ginger molasses type cookie was the request. So I took that request and I changed it up quite a bit, as we do. So it might not be exactly the same, but we're going to be making a really nice soft baked prune ginger cookie.
That sounds delicious.
Good, I'm happy because prune is usually one of those ones that might throw some people off. No,
but it makes things so moist and chewy, actually. Like it kind of has that molasses.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's such a great versatile ingredient. I think it's wonderful in desserts. We might think of it as like for one purpose and one purpose only, maybe growing up. But it does have, like Steph said, that sort of molassesy, caramelized sort of flavor, which is delicious. And it's going to make this really, really nice puree into the wet part of our wet dry ingredients. for our soft baked cookies. So I'm going to start off with our wet ingredients. Bring it down here, and I have this just like you can definitely do this in a blender as well. I just use my blender for the soup, so I have this like a little mini food processor, mini chopper, which will work just fine. And what first thing I'm going to do is add 1 egg. We're going to add an egg to this. Then I'm going to add about half a cup of pitted prunes. Everything in here. Measure it out. This is, we've used enough prunes to know that what a half cup is, or what a half cup looks like now for baking. Let's say that. All right, so about half a cup in there. Beautiful. We're going to go with about 4 tablespoons. We're making a bigger batch of cookies. 4 tablespoons of maple syrup here. This is going to provide a little bit of sweetness. I think a lot of the classic like ginger molasses cookies have like excessive, like at least a cup or more of sugar. So we're cutting that down a little bit. It is still, providing that sweetness, but considerably less. A little bit of vanilla. So about a teaspoon vanilla extract. This is optional. If you have it, it's a nice way to use it. Adds a little bit more of that flavor, that aroma. And then about 4 tablespoons or a quarter cup of any oil, any neutral oil will work. This is just sunflower oil because it is, again, it's neutral. It's not going to really impact the flavor. I've done something like this before with like olive oil. I like the taste of olive oil, so you can definitely use that. If you want to use even like an avocado oil or something like that, it's completely up to you. So about a quarter cup. And what am I missing? I think that is it for our wet. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pulse this up. I will mute myself.
So I have a little story. My aunt growing up used to make this delicious chocolate cake. And it was delicious. She'd cook it for the entire family. And one year I asked her what's inside, and she was hesitant to tell me what was. And it was this chocolate cake that was like super moist, very, very gooey. And actually, she's a dietitian too. So growing up, her meals were really nice and special. And anyway, so one year I asked her what's inside, and when she gave me the list of ingredients, prunes were in. And she was hesitant to tell the family, what was inside this delicious chocolate cake for obvious reasons. But I always remember it being super, super moist and very flavorful. And guess what? Prunes were the main ingredient. So, I think that this is a really awesome way to include kind of some of that sweetness, bringing in that moist without loading it with molasses or like loads and loads of sugar. This obviously gives some fiber, which is fine. But it's a really nice trick to keep those desserts nice and moist.
All right.
I think it adds a healthy factor too, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
You get that fruit in there, and oh my gosh.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so you can see how it's pureed, those wet ingredients. And it might still have a little bit of texture, but that's actually okay. It's kind of nice for these cookies. And so we're going to just pour that into the bowl. It's almost like this prune paste, molassesy paste. And like this is a really, really nice like moist component that you can add if you're making like a loaf, like a banana loaf, or you can do like a spiced prune loaf, which would be really tasty instead. Right, I'm gonna pour all that in. So this is, like I said, this is the wet component of the dish, and then for the dried, we're going to use a combination of all-purpose flour, and you can definitely use like a whole wheat flour for sure in that. But if use what you have to, if it's accessible, if you have the all-purpose. We're going to use about a cup. So there's the wet. We're using about a cup. All-purpose in there. We can kind of slowly mix that in, fold it in. I don't want to overwork it. Okay, so there's our all-purpose. So 1 cup all-purpose, and then 1 cup of almond flour. Now, almond flour is just ground almonds. So you don't want to get almond flour and you have almonds at home. Just throw them in a blender or a food processor until they're nice and ground. Okay, and this is going to just lighten up the cookies. It's going to add some of its own fats as well.
And that would add a nutrition factor too as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's just a different type of flour, so the glycemic index might not be as high because of the fiber and the fats that are included. So yeah, I mean, I'm not particular, you know, as long as the flours that you're using are mostly like whole grains type of thing. So an almond flour would, you know, it's using the whole part, you know, just as opposed to having like a refined flour. But remember, like some people who are experiencing GI issues, like any tummy issues, if they're having kind of that, like diarrhea episodes. I mean, certainly don't have the prunes, but you know, you would want to use more of those white flour options. So it really depends, you know, like all foods can fit, you know, eating well. I always say this to clients, like it looks differently for everybody. And depending on what somebody is experiencing in that moment, you know, like maybe an almond flour wouldn't be the best case for them. Maybe a refined flour would be. So it kind of depends on what someone is experiencing in that moment. But generally speaking, yes, to answer your question, an almond flour would be, you know, a better option because it has more fiber and those healthier fats.
Okay, you brought up a really important, interesting point, Stephanie. You said that almond flour had a lower glycemic content. So yeah. Is that generally with the nut flours or?
Yeah, mostly because of the higher fiber and some of the fats that are included. That will, because if you think about it, it's like a white bread, right? That just has something that will spike your glycemic index and lower it down quite quickly. Whereas when they're adding in fiber or fats to something, you know, it's kind of more leveled off. Now that said, I'm not so fussy on the glycemic index of foods, like particular ingredients, because at the end of the day, we eat things in combination of things. So it's mostly that glycemic load. So if you're adding in that fat, that protein to whatever that ingredient is, you're going to naturally make the glycemic index a little bit lower. Right? Okay. So it's not something that I particularly fuss over or, you know, really concentrate on because we eat things together. So if something has a higher glycemic index, well, you know, balancing it out with other ingredients like fats and proteins will actually bring it down as well. I mean, at the end of the day, we're making a cookie. It's sweet.
Right. Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So here's our batter. Now, I added a little bit of baking soda, baking powder, and for the spice, a little bit of ginger and ground cinnamon. And just a reminder, all of our recipes we post on our website, we'll plug it in. We'll plug it at the end as well. But just for exact measurements, you can always check that out. And so mix it up until everything's incorporated, and you have this really nice cookie batter. And I'm just going to take a scoop. You can do this with your hands if you want to get like real messy, but if you're working off of a laptop like I am, you don't want it covered in prune mix, then use a little ice cream scoop. I think it just works really, really well. So I'm portioning these out onto baking sheet lined with parchment. You can use a Silpat as well. This, again, just with the non-stick, is a lifesaver for sure. All right, so if it gets a little sticky, it's okay. You can just sort of help it out. This is going to be a softer batter. It's not like a classic like gingerbread cookie batter, which is a little less tacky. All right. Put this last piece on here, and then this is going to go into the oven, 350 degrees for about 15 minutes. Okay, and I've got 2 here that I cooked before. They're giant. You want to flatten them. You can just use like a little fork or something to flatten them out. But here we have these delicious cookies, soft baked, super tasty, super moist, and the kitchen now smells like ginger, cinnamon, and vanilla. So,
smells like Christmas.